All right, Chelsea fans, welcome back to another episode. That's right, of the London is Blue podcast, hopefully your favorite Chelsea podcast. And it is Dan here alongside Sam because you know what? It is transfer season. That's right. Chelsea may not be doing tons of business this window, but it doesn't mean Chelsea aren't being linked with every possible name under the sun to add a little bit of steel, to add some reinforcement, and to help Chelsea and Pochettino find a way back up the table as they continue to round into some good form heading into a really interesting run of games for Chelsea with Middlesbrough coming up. And the day that this pod releases, the first of a two-leg semifinal in the Carabao Cup, and then advancing in the FA Cup and a match against a depleted, potentially, Liverpool side at the end of the month. Will Chelsea get into the market? Will we make that major signing? And Sam, there's no other player that Chelsea supporters have wanted to learn more about, have wanted to get a deep dive from us on, than a name that Chelsea have been linked with, I would say, consistently over the past 3 to 4 windows when it comes to who is a target man, a number 9, who could sit up top and bring a little bit of form, a little bit of function, and a little bit of pizzazz to the front of our attacking lineup. And that is none other than Victor Osimhen, who plays for Napoli. And this is our special on him. So we're going to take some time going over what his background is, how he got to where he is within his current game, what are those strengths, where can he improve, how would he fit, and then tons of listener questions to get a little bit more detail and information out there for the people. So how many countless nights and days were you up watching footage for this one?
I think I've just been now, I think, become a more seasoned campaigner on LIBP, where the last time we went into January and I was like, it's going to be a breeze. And then I got caught completely cold with the amount of signings we made and the amount of players that we were linked to. So this time I started scouting Osimhen about 8 months in advance. And I've just been taking copious notes. And I thought, okay, if it happens, if we do go for it, or if the link becomes more concrete, then we can pull a pod out, at short notice. So I'm ready. I think it's just a lot of information to put together. And it's also important to state that there have been seismic changes for him. He's gone from coming into this league in the Serie A, and then after that, he's gone on to win the Serie A with Napoli after 33 years. And then he's, now become the new heir to the African king throne. And obviously, he looks good in blue already. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised that an African striker who idolizes Didier Drogba is being linked with us. And it's super exciting for everybody here to find somebody like him in his ilk. Probably has a lot of mental characteristics in terms of his presence, his aura, which also are radiant. So, yeah, I think should be a good one.
Well, we're going to jump into all that. Before that, we just want to say thank you to everybody who helps support the podcast, leaving 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, subscribing on YouTube, and hitting the bell icon to get notified, or leaving thumbs ups and comments on each of the videos. Helps people find the podcast, stay connected, and get involved and engage. Also, you can get involved by signing up for our free newsletter. That's right, Sam drops a weekly newsletter, The Dispatch. You can get stuck in on that one. It's absolutely fantastic. And you enjoyed our wonderful Discord community if you want to support the podcast with a couple dollars every month. But you don't have to do that to get involved. You always can hit us up on all the social media channels, usually at London Blue Pod. But that is going to get us into, as we start these always, when we're doing a little bit of a deep dive on a player, some story time from Sam. We're going to learn a little bit about how Victor got from where he was to where he is. So I'm going to sit back and shut up for a few minutes while you give us the yarn. Spin it for us.
Yeah, he's got a very interesting story. He's for all the reputation that he has of being such a flamboyant, mercurial striker, he's notoriously shy. Doesn't give interviews very often, but he did go on a couple of radio shows in Nigeria to talk about just his upbringing and what football meant to him. So he was born in Lagos in Nigeria, and came through extremely tough conditions. He used to hawk newspapers and water bottles in traffic with his mother. His brother was a vendor, and in this interview that I saw, this radio interview, he said that I come from a place where nothing is promised, which I felt was a very powerful line. He started playing in a local club there, and his breakout moment came in the Under 17 World Cup in 2015, where he ended up scoring 10 goals and assisted two. And just every club in Europe was suddenly on high alert saying, who is this kid? And after that tournament, he basically decided to commit to signing with Wolfsburg when he was 19 years old. I think he was 17 years old then. And it was, I would say, an extremely difficult start for him. He came to his new club injured. Obviously, first foray into Europe, did not know how to settle in, played only 14 times over 2 seasons, didn't score a single goal, so didn't quite go as expected. And in the summer, after the second season, he was basically on trial with a couple of really good Belgian clubs who were doing great things on the top of the league. But then he had a bout of malaria, and because of his physical condition after the illness, they refused to take him on loan. So he actually decided to join this Belgian club called Charleroi in 2018, and that's when he took off. He scored 12 in 25 league appearances. His loan became a permanent deal, and then immediately after that, he left for Lille. And that's when I think he came to the attention of the big guys, where everybody else started looking at his performances there. Coincidentally, his first Champions League goal came against us in a 2-1 home loss in the Champions League, where Tammy Abraham and Villian got the goals for us. And that team, Lille was sort of accumulating this reputation of nurturing some very good talent. Mike Magnon was the goalkeeper that evening. He's gone on and done great things. He's now almost on the verge of becoming a regular number one for France. The CB that day was Gabriel, who's now at Arsenal, and Osimhen took number 7, which belonged to Rafael Leao at Lille. So quite a lot of big stars who came out of there, and I think Osimhen has just continued that legacy. And just one season after that, he's got a big move from Napoli, who were willing to pay 70 million, rising to 80, which made him the most expensive African of all time. And of course, the rest I would say is history. Went on to help Napoli win the Scudetto after a long, long time. Took them to some extremely good victories in a great Champions League campaign where they arguably should have done better. And now he is the top scoring African player of all time in Serie A. So that's who he is. But like you mentioned, it's not been an easy road for him. He's had to go through a lot of personal hardships, but a lot of these strikers who come through personal hardships, I mean, it reflects a lot of time when you see him play. I will discuss about his strengths, but I think what stands out for me even before I watch him play is just how resilient he is. He's constantly demanding. A lot of the times when you see him off the ball, he's he's shouting at his teammates for the ball. He's outnumbered. He's got two 6'3" center backs around him, but he still wants the ball. And he's shorter than them by 2 inches, but he's like, just give me the ball, I'll do the rest. And that's great to see. I think that's the making of him. And I think that's also the reason why everybody is excited. Great football player, but obviously comes with the right mindset to back it up.
Well, take a look just at that Serie A in Napoli performance that he's had. It's been 4 total seasons for him, 119 matches played, 94 starts, just under 8,500 minutes. And in that time, he has earned 67 goals, 11 assists. That's 78 goal contributions, goals and assists. That's a nice number there. That's a goal every 0.71 over 90, and goal plus assist is a 0.83. So definitely underlying numbers that get you excited, a story that starts to burn the fire or the passion potentially in your heart for the player and potentially seeing him in some Chelsea blue. But we're going to talk about specific strengths and weaknesses within his game in just a moment. We're going to take our very first break and we're back. It's all about what does Victor do really well and what are those areas of opportunity still in his game as a developing player. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. All right, Sam. So you put out the call, and individuals like Assad here asking the question, what are the strengths and weaknesses of the player? I think that's the best place after learning a little bit more about his backstory to get started, just to set the stage for Where is he at currently? And I would also maybe add the fact that he has seen a little bit of a regression, maybe season over season at Napoli, just in terms of the number of goals and assists that he has right now, 10 total across 18 matches played, 14 starts. So we talked about, last season, maybe at a unsustainable 0.93 goals per 90 and a 1.05 goals plus assists over 90 over just over 3,000 minutes. What are those things that people are drawn to, that get them excited, that get them motivated, that get them campaigning for Chelsea to go out and sign this player?
Yeah, I think what was key when you mentioned about he's sort of gone through this regression, I would want to stress here that it's not just him, but Napoli in general have gone through an extremely bad patch. And it's been tumultuous even through the Serie A win for him. He's gone through, I would say, different systems where there have been slight tweaks to the way Napoli function. So, if I were to talk about just how the tactical setup works, when he came into Serie A for the first time, his left-sided player was Lorenzo Insigne, obviously a huge player in Napoli, a Naples boy, and was doing great things. Fabian Ruiz was their architect in midfield, somebody who's extremely comfortable in possession. And when Spalletti came in after Gattuso, he wanted them to be a modern, almost anti-Italian team. They wanted to keep the ball. They wanted to, bait people with possession and then suddenly switch gears and go through the center. So a lot of the Napoli goals that you see Osimhen score in the beginning were actually through the middle. A lot of number eights putting in through balls, trying to launch him against center back centrally. A lot of quality coming in from those central areas. Insigne, who was, I would say, much better in central areas than outside, was also offering some great numbers there in terms of assists and goals. So Osimhen was also doing good things with him. So it was a very different Osimhen that we saw in that first season. After Insigne left, then we had obviously the Georgian wonder kid Kvaratskhelia, who's come in on the left hand side. Fabian Ruiz left for PSG. The midfield three has changed. Now Labotka has become, that operator from deep, and it's again moved around a little bit. I would say they've added a dimension where they are more direct. They tried going and then figuring out if they can do more things from wide. So I just give you an example. In the 2021 season, Napoli were fifth from bottom for crosses, managing 550 in the entire season. And the next season, they were fifth from top with 681. So they just directly got 130 crosses in over the course of a season. And it was just trying to figure out we've got somebody up front who can offer us that reference point. So how can we maximize the supply to him? So Napoli evolved there, gave him more supply, tried to figure out if they can use their wingers to deliver crosses. And I would say the team was very well built to give him a constant supply chain. This season, they've lost their key defensive talisman in Kim Min-jae, who went to Bayern Munich. We discussed him during the World Cup. I said he would be a great buy for Chelsea when we were talking about him. Um, and then Spalletti obviously went to the Italian national team. And I would say this season, although Osimhen does look a little lost. He is an alchemist. A lot of the crap that Napoli's been pulling out, he's been turning to gold. A lot of the times they've been trying to hoof clearances and long balls into nothing, and he just chases everything down and he's still trying to make things happen. So his numbers have declined when you look at his personal metrics. He's averaging less touches, overall touches. I think it's the least amount of touches he's had in the last 7 years. He's also averaging about 1.4, 1.5 touches in the penalty box, lesser than he was last season. So obviously he is starved a little bit. The team is struggling. Kvaratskhelia hasn't been the same. Osimhen hasn't been the same. And in defense, they aren't able to stop transitions and then defend as well as they used to. So overall, I think it's just been decline. But that's what the system is. And I think it's a system well suited to Victor Osimhen to maximize his strengths. And yeah, I just wanted to sort of like set that out because then we can talk about, what makes him so good and what makes him maybe a questionable investment for the money that's been talked about.
So I know some of the things that people might look at, obviously you mentioned a couple of nuggets that we could pick into, just things where he is been that talismanic figure that he is able to. The way you're describing it almost feels a little Hazard-esque, where there were some really, really terrible games that Chelsea played where you would argue that they were not at the level, yet Hazard was a step above and was capable of saying, you know what, even though we played terribly, I am going to be the difference maker. I'm going to be the decider, whether it's the number of shots I'm taking, the acceleration or the speed, the fact that he always generally was there for a big game. That I'm almost hearing a little bit of that, and I don't want to oversell that, but it feels like that's the direction you're leading me down. Is that correct or incorrect?
Yeah, absolutely. When I talk about somebody saying I am him, I would literally say it's Victor Osimhen who comes to mind. So you pointed out strengths extremely well. I think a lot of people who've seen his compilations of his goals, of his highlight reel, will obviously tell you that the first thing that stands out is that he is a sensational aerial threat, and his leap is extremely good. His header is probably one of the best in Europe. He troubles guys who are taller than him. He regularly goes in with the kind of force that is hard to resist and hard to endure. And I was looking at his numbers on Y Scout, and I mean, obviously, this isn't just headers, but out of 25 shots that he took from crosses last year, he got 16 on target and 12 of them were goals. So, every two shots that he has on goal from a cross ends up in the goal. And he's extremely precise. If you look at his, I would say, array of or his highlight reel of headers, you can watch the one against Eintracht Frankfurt where he jumped higher than anybody else and he got there a second earlier, but the way the ball just hit his head and looped over the goalkeeper into the top of the net. And then there are headers where he's rampaged 15 yards and thrown himself at the ball and almost taken the net off. So he has a great ability to manipulate the ball with his head, and he's got the physical gifts to back it up. So aerially he's going to be super super important, and I stress that because that's exactly what we're missing in our front six. It's not the tallest front line. We've talked about Jackson not being somebody who's great with his head. He's got one assist with his head, which he did very well, but other than that, he's not been a reference point. You really can't have the crossing guys that we have in the team and not have somebody attacking crosses into the box. So we lost Havertz, for example, who did pop up with the occasional header, but not seen a lot of it this season. So that would be great. The second thing I would like to stress is just his athleticism. I think he's a fantastic athlete. He's got a very unique frame for a center forward. He's very lithe. He's got this lean, almost crossbow like body. He can manipulate his body shape very quickly. A lot of the times when you watch him shoot, I would think a coach would say that's not how you're supposed to shoot. But his ability to shoot from awkward angles, even when the ball is, in suboptimal areas or a little farther away than it needs to be, he still gets it on target. And he's able to, extend his foot above his head, bring the ball down, and like just contort himself into yogic positions and get the ball on target, which I think is another unique aspect to him. So biomechanics wise, I think he's a very interesting forward. He's able to just adjust his body shape very quickly. His acceleration and speed, like you mentioned, is another a huge, huge plus. His ability to just explode from a standing start and just his volume of sprints. I think he, at one point in time, he was clocking more sprints than Kylian Mbappe at extreme high speeds. So when he does hit top gear, he tends to go extremely hard, and he's very hard to catch once he gets going. So his speed is going to be good, and it's extremely effective over short distances, which I would like to highlight because when you're moving in the box against centre backs, his ability to change direction and just explode in front of people is what gets him goals. And that's key to his game. So speed is another thing that makes him an absolute nightmare to defend against. Shooting volume is another strength. I would say even in his poorest games, he somehow finds the way to get at least four shots away, which is, I would say, a gift for a centre forward. He does not shy away, and if he does get frustrated, he will take a pop from 25 yards. And he's not a good long distance shooter. He does get a couple of goals, but not as many as he should. But he still gets those shots away with great power, and he will give you that threat. He will not sit back and just wander around aimlessly. So his shooting volume and the way he shoots is also great. A lot of shots are low, extremely hard. The goalkeeper has to get down to ground level supremely quickly to stop it. He's not somebody who aims a lot for the top corner, just trying to rifle it in. So he's got a very good shot, very direct shot on him, which works for him. Another thing that stands out for me is that he's a very good channel runner. He's a very willing, industrious runner. So off the ball, when Napoli are breaking, which is, I would say, a lot of their bread and butter, he does a lot of off the ball sprints. And what that works in his favor is that he's just a high gravity player. So a lot of the times he's the furthest forward. So a lot of centre backs on the break try to go out wide to defend him, and that leaves spaces in the centre for Kvaratskhelia, or if he's going on the left hand side, then Matteo Politano. So if you imagine in this system, somebody, for example, on the right hand side, if Osimhen's running on the right hand side, both centre backs are trying to make sure that Osimhen doesn't get behind them. It leaves Mudrik free on the left hand side with a fullback. So that's the kind of imbalance he creates when he's running in transition. And he's a smart, intelligent runner, very intense, very, very hard. So tough to defend. So it's also a big, big strength. Uh, like I mentioned, I think this subset to a point would be just line manipulation. A good example of this would be just to go and watch the 4-2 defeat that Napoli had this season against Real Madrid and watch the distance between their midfield and where their centre backs are. Because their midfield is about 20 yards away, and both centre backs are about 20 yards away from their fullbacks. Why? Because they're marking Victor Osimhen. And that's the threat because they know you can't give him space. The moment you try to drop and catch him offside, you do have a degree of success, but there's also every chance because this guy is blindingly quick that he'll just go in behind you and score. So a lot of defenders often get manipulated by his speed, by just his ability to move very quickly, to move into blind spots in positions that are hard to defend. So if you want somebody who's manipulating the back line, which I think we haven't had for a long time, we've had centre forwards who move around a lot. I would say Alvaro Morata wasn't the kind of forward who liked being up against physical centre backs. He liked moving around a lot. Same with Joao Felix. Same with all the centre forwards who are forward. Kai Havertz not very good against centre backs. This guy is. He's happy standing next to two centre backs and getting their attention and letting everybody else get their space. So he is a line manipulator, gives everybody else a chance to breathe. And like you mentioned, the most important point, big game player. He always turns up on the big occasion. I think he enjoys it. He basks in the spotlight. I saw his game against Juventus, where they beat Juventus 5-1 last season. And he was he was an absolute bane. Juventus's centre backs wanted nothing to do with him, couldn't handle him. They're getting bullied left, right, center. So when he does get in his groove and his team is backing him up, he's a battering ram. And he's a medieval battering ram. He will keep on hitting you. He will keep on running at you. Just tireless and relentless. So great to have in big games because like Rudiger, he ups his intensity, which is always nice to have.
Well, that is a ton of strengths, and I'm sure there's a few things about his game that are not necessarily perfect yet. So we will take a very quick and final break. When we get back, we're going to talk about where Victor Osimhen has an ability to improve and answer some of those listener questions. So stay tuned and we'll be right back. All right, Sam. So the list of strengths was really, really long. I think this is actually nice, though, but when we talk about areas of his game that he can improve upon, it's actually a shorter list, which to me feels like a little bit of that change of pace because Victor Osimhen would be an older player than Chelsea have recruited previously over the last couple of windows, a little bit more of a finished article or closer to being a finished article type player than some of the players we've gone after. And so it feels like this is accurate, that we should be expecting a player who does have less areas that we need to rough edges that we need to stand over in terms of improving his game. Things like his link up play under pressure, which would be interesting as from an adaptation from Serie A to the Premier League. But what are the one or two that you want to just kind of rattle off here as areas where you think he might need to improve coming to Chelsea?
Yeah, I think that point that you brought up is supremely important. I think it's partially down to him, like his link up play under pressure, but it's also down to how Napoli are playing because in the way that they play, they like two guys who hold width, and it's hard to combine with two guys who are basically on the opposite spectrum on the same forward line. So a lot of the times in transition, he's isolated. He's just so far up ahead compared to the rest of the team, which is going to defend, trying to win the ball back for him, that it's hard for him to link up with people. So a lot of the games he ends up with 5, 6 passes completed, which if it happens in Chelsea, you'll have an entire Sky Sports feature saying these are the 7 touches Victor Osimhen had in the game against Crystal Palace, which will happen. It does happen. So I think that's a concern. A lot of the times he's just a ghost. He's happy to just keep moving around without the ball, waiting for somebody to supply it to him. And sometimes that can result in 15, 20 minutes without the ball, which is a concern. So that's one thing that I would want to highlight. I would also say that his passing under pressure is questionable. Let's be kind there. He's in a league where those technical flaws can be disguised. Um, but he does tend to struggle with the weight of his passes. Sometimes when he's under pressure, he overhits them, not the right power, not the right intention. So I think that can be an issue in the Premier League. His physical, although his physical stuff is very good, I think against more stronger centre backs, he does tend to struggle back to goal. A lot of the times, people come clattering into him from behind, which will happen on an everyday basis in the Premier League, and I think that's where he struggles. He loses the ball a lot, goes down asking for a foul, doesn't get it. So contact when from coming from behind, big issue. When he's on his side, when he can use his arms to hold off contact, he's absolutely fine. He's got the strength to jostle, but otherwise, when he's back to goal, when he's square, big issue. Another thing I'd like to highlight is his right-sided bias, which is a kind way of saying he's very one-footed. He's scored 3 of his last 57 league goals with his left foot. This can be an issue. He doesn't take as many left-footed shots as he should because his movement is also one-dimensional. He loves the far post, so likes coming in from the right-hand side and getting those nice angles for himself. But I would also like to stress that Haaland is pretty similar. This season, despite his scoring exploits, 0 goals with his weaker foot. Last season, 6 goals with his weaker foot. So being one-footed is not an issue. It can happen. Strikers tend to favor one foot over the other. It's just he tends to score well from good positions. So I wouldn't say that's an issue, but you will sometimes see that when he's trying to hold up the play, it's easier for him to turn left, but he still turns right. That can be predictable. That can be an issue, and those things are picked up on very very quickly in the Premier League. Last season, he was also the most offside player in Europe's top 5 leagues, which you can interpret one of both ways. You can say that he's not got his timing right, he just keeps straying offside. But you can also interpret it as makes a lot of high intensity quality runs in behind, so he's consistently getting caught behind, which is, I would say, maybe fixable with players who are on the same wavelength, but otherwise on a bad day, it can be extremely frustrating. And the last I would say is his dribbling. His ball carrying is not good, and he hides it to his credit. Doesn't carry the ball very often. You give him the ball in the center, and he will run with it. But if you want to use him well, I would say give him the ball for not more than 3 touches. Try to let him take 3 touches, carry it, and spread it out somewhere outside on the wings. Don't let him dribble. Don't get him to do any of the wing play because he's not good at it. He averages over the last season and a half less than a dribble a game, and his success percentage is around 40%. I think 38% this season, so not very good. Doesn't take on players unless it's absolutely necessary, and I don't think he has the ingredients to make things happen from wide. I think when I was researching this pod about a week ago, his cross completion percentage was 0%. So that says a lot.
It just means he can improve to a maximum level if he's starting at zero. So, I mean, I guess that is a maybe a nicer way to look at it as we try to frame things in a more positive manner here. But as we look a little bit deeper, I know there's some questions that the audience have asked us as well. And I think the first one, Kyle and Ryan asking very similar questions about how does he fit at Chelsea? What is that relationship? I know that you mentioned the need for someone to be able to take advantage of the crossers that we have in this team. I mean, we saw just in the most recent match against Preston, the Malo Gusto directly on top of the crown of Armando Broya's head, effectively. You know, Reece James essentially coming back healthy at some point, either late this season or next season. Ben Chilwell back from his recovery in the very near future. I mean, we have players that can cross effectively and hit strikers if they are in the right position. It feels like this is maybe where his fit is really being that individual who can take advantage and really feast on what is actually being delivered by our fullbacks, which is not necessarily the profile of Nico Jackson and is sort of the Armando Broya profile, but has not necessarily shown anywhere near the level of consistency to be the dependable option as that number 9 in that spot.
Yeah, you're absolutely spot on there. I think when you want a box presence, you want a reference that we're missing, you probably won't find anybody better than him. And when you call him a target man, I don't think you do him a disservice, because if you do look at his numbers, as in conventional forward versus a target man, I think his numbers would sort of skew towards the latter, because he is used very, very indiscriminately as, just like I mentioned, a medieval battering ram. You want to throw in crosses at him. He's somebody who wants crosses thrown at him, and he will attack them, with as much gusto, pun intended, as he can. So, like you mentioned, a lot of players that we have in the side, Malo Gusto being one of them, excellent crosser from the right hand side. We haven't seen as many crosses as we should, because it just hasn't been a part of our game. I think we are bottom, I think third from bottom this season for crosses attempted, while Napoli are somewhere around fifth. And that just tells you the scale of the difference in how direct we are when it comes from wide areas. When you look at the quality of Ben Chilwell, when you look at Reece James, when you look at even Mikhailo Mudryk, who has a good cross on him, I believe, those four players can act as very good supply lines. There have been some nice moments where Cole Palmer has picked up positions similar to what Matteo Politano does at Napoli in that half space. And he's looked at the far post for a cross, but nobody's there to attack it. I think that's the kind of situations you want a Victor Osimhen attacking in. So the crossers in particular will be benefiting. I would say the fullbacks, if Pochettino decides to play two of them, will also benefit. So I think those five players, like the three attackers that we have, tend to be very cross heavy, and the fullbacks will probably be most happy when Osimhen comes in. Good assist numbers, free assist numbers for everybody.
Things that we like. I think another question that Adam and News Jeff put in was really around how would he adapt to the Premier League. I think we talked a little bit about this, but just in a summary, how do you think his acclimatization would go, maybe relative to other strikers Chelsea have tried from foreign leagues and have not necessarily hit the mark in terms of their performance?
I'd say some aspects of his play definitely fit how we've been playing this season, although I can't promise that's how we will play at the second end of the season, because we've not had 12 players on average every single game. So it might change, when we have players in the right positions. But overall, I think he's shown that he's very well suited to a transition system. He's able to exploit spaces in behind. He's also got fairly good hold up play. He can hold it up for you. He can wait for runners to come. He can do simple link up stuff with two, three attackers behind. He's also shown, some kind of good understanding with the players there at Napoli. So I would say that he's capable of that. But he's also shown that when you throw crosses into the box against a settled defense, he can be a threat. So when you look at him, he's got a lot of tools that can work in a variety of systems. But I would also say adaptability in terms of the red flags can also be an issue. I look at his technical deficiencies, and then I do think that some of them will get exposed in the Premier League. where loose touches, his ball manipulation under pressure, his just the inconsistency of it can stand out. I think that'll be probably very frustrating to see. And when he comes up against the likes of Everton, the likes of, I don't know if Stoke City will be there next season, but like those kind of sides with huge centre backs who want to get rough, it'll be a huge difference to what the standard is in the Italian Serie A versus what he'll face in the Premier League. So it's going to be physically tougher. I'm pretty sure he's up for the fight, but they will hit him where it hurts. And that's going to be a big challenge for him. And not that I'm not saying he's not up to it, but he will definitely have to take that into account. So I think those things are going to be an interesting question.
So another topic that people had questions about was just around the injury record that Victor Osimhen has. I think there are two sets of injuries, though. Maybe the ones that are, the muscular, like hamstring issues, the things that are the soft tissue that get people super concerned because Chelsea don't have a great track record with those currently. And then maybe some that are more of the, hey, he missed 54 days because there was a broken cheekbone, or that are less predictable and more down to just the the nature of the game. Like, I don't know if that necessarily, I don't feel like that one counts as bad, but how do you view his injury record, which I feel like has improved from his earlier career? I actually think he's become a more durable player, but am I reading that incorrectly?
I would agree with you. I think the injury issue just looks a little bit inflated because of, like you mentioned, his ability to be a klutz, which I completely relate to because I've had a similar injury where I was playing a game and I ended up dislocating my shoulder 3 inches away from the shoulder blade. And he's had a similar injury where he clattered his shoulder and he's done it 3 times. I think the same shoulder. He went to AFCON and he did it once. Then he did it at Wolfsburg once. So he's had that shoulder injury. Then I think once he went into a challenge very hard and he fractured his face and his cheekbone. So the face mask that he wears is a Chelsea tradition. It goes well with every Chelsea forward that we've had. So he's worn that. But those are his single-mindedness to go into everything hard and unrelenting, which I would say is a plus. So it does rule him out of like 13, 14 games on average, but it doesn't seem to phase him, which I would say is a good thing. The rest of the stuff, like you said, small muscle injuries, hamstring injuries, I would say with just the volume of games going up, with the intensity going up, I would say it's becoming more of an emergent pattern. I wouldn't worry about it that much. I would worry about the fact that AFCON losing Jackson and Osimhen will be a double whammy. So that's going to be another thing that we have to consider. But otherwise, I don't think it should be an issue.
And as we round out and kind of get across the finish line on this episode, I think Craig and Ash asking very fair questions around just should we be a little skittish around trying to go after someone in Serie A. I think we touched on that a little bit, but it comes down to the price tag. And I know it's not your money, it's not my money, it's Blue Co's money, it's Chelsea's money. And as long as they're meeting all of their financial fair play requirements and bringing in the sponsorship dollars, that is not necessarily a concern because the market is the market. And there's not, as we look around, a ton of ready-made talented strikers. And so they are going to go for a premium. For the prices, though, that we've seen, do we feel like Victor Osimhen is worth it? Are we going to potentially pay above market value, at market value? How are you feeling with that?
Well, the pragmatist in me says not a good deal. And I will try and justify it why. I think when you do go for 100 million player, you either go for a unicorn, basically somebody who fits all systems, or just takes an existing one and makes it tenfold better. So I would say a Moises Caicedo, you fit into any system, and he just ends up making it better because he's got skills on the ball defensively to just elevate everything. We haven't seen it yet because we've been chaotic and we've just been a mess on certain junctures of games. But otherwise, I expect him to be absolutely fundamental. With Osimhen, I think there are some strengths you have to absolutely cater to. There has to be a direct supply line. I would say his best moments come in transition. A lot of the times when I try to study his certain finer aspects, like how well does he create separation, He tends to do it when he's on the break, where CBs are backpedaling, where it's easier to create, that extra yard to shoot. How is he going to do that when everybody just stands in front of him in a static back five and giving him no route to shoot? Interesting to see. From the basic sample size, yes, in Serie A he does it well. But how well will he do it in the Premier League? Big question mark. I know a lot of people have said that there is existing PTSD from Lukaku, and I think that happened with just misprofiling what Lukaku was. He looked like a target man, but he wasn't. He loved running in behind. Osimhen is a target man. You can use him like this, but the question is, how effective will he be in the Premier League? I think he will struggle technically. I think his physical gifts will pale a little in comparison. He will still be very good in the air. He will still score, I would say, maybe 10 goals, 11, 12 goals. But if you don't give him penalties, if the penalties go elsewhere, and you give him a system where we're not crossing as much, where the emphasis on far post crosses is not as heavy as it is now, how well does he perform? And those are all concerning question marks. There was also a really good question in between, Dan. I think it was Chelsea Animated asking, what about his link up with Nkunku? Because a lot of the times we're looking at our attack and saying he's going to be that unifying factor. I think it's an interesting question. I don't know how that dynamic works. I will say that there's a pre-existing sample size where he's linked up with somebody like a Lorenzo Insigne well. Um, just his ability to play like small passes, 1-2s into space, that has worked. Will that be emulatable with Nkunku? I don't know, and that's something that you have to worry about, especially with a guy who's taking 6, 7 passes a game. Is he going to provide the same volume as Nico Jackson? Is he going to be as comfortable in tight spaces? My answer is no. So I do think that it's a big risk. And speaking yes or no, I wouldn't make it. But it does look like the club is extremely keen. And what do I know? I'm just like giving my humble opinion on
Oh,
this.
come
So
on. Come
he
on.
does.
People know that you have the direct line into Win Stanley and the rest of the team. They're listening to this
Oh,
episode right now, and this may or may not factor into the decision of going after Victor Osimhen. But I think the more important thing, Sam, is that we do have a couple of other podcasts for the if you don't want to pay the premium here episode. So there are a few other strikers and players that we're going to get to over the next couple of weeks because we don't anticipate this to be a quick deal. We don't anticipate this to be a deal that necessarily gets done even this window potentially because there's no indication that Napoli want to give up Victor Osimhen in the middle of the season. So we do have some time to talk about other targets that Chelsea might be considering. But hopefully, we'll hear from the listeners and they'll let us know, do they think the price is fair? Are they excited about Victor Osimhen potentially as a player for Chelsea? And do they want him to be the priority number one target that Chelsea go after?
yeah, I think the intention here was probably just, have another excuse to talk to you. I mean, that works for me. But just to be able to sort of sit together and maybe offer our listeners an insight in January. Like, obviously, a deal is extremely hard to pursue now, but just giving them a foundation on which they can follow their targets into the summer, saying, okay, I know about Osimhen. So how has he developed? How has he improved? Have numbers gone up? Like, why has that happened? Maybe if there's a huge enough change, then we'll definitely do a follow-up one, but we wanted to cover all our bases because there are some very interesting names being linked in some key positions, which might end up being like starters for the next 6, 7 years. We can't do contracts that long anymore, but I do feel like if they do come in, they will be starters. So I thought that it'll be great to sit down with you and discuss that. So Osman is one down. And I don't want to tease who's up next. I think we'll just say that, stay tuned and hopefully you'll enjoy it as much as you did this one.
That's right, setting the stage with a little suspense. But Sam, thank you so much for all the hard work. Thank you to our wonderful listeners for checking out this episode. Again, you can help support the podcast, 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, subscribe on YouTube, sign up for our free newsletter, or get involved in our wonderful Discord community. But that is going to do it for this one. So until next time, Chelsea fans, you know what to do. Keep the blue flag flying high.